states are Indiana, West Virginia, Ohio, Pennsylvania, Kentucky, Illinois, Wisconsin, and Michigan. And today we are beginning a new era, sharing queen and drone breeding education to all the HHBBC states members. In the new adventure, every year each state will share an educational presentation. This will give us all a chance to share important information and keep in touch with each other. This first speaker for Kentucky is a very special person to us, and he has done presentations almost every year since the beginning of 2016 when our association started. Dr. Lawrence Connor, known to everyone by Larry Connor, is a Michigan native. He departed Michigan State University upon completion of his PhD dissertation on strawberry pollination and assumed the position of extension apicultural entomologist at the Ohio State University in Columbus. There, his program attracted the attention of investors interested in moving the Dayton Starline and Midnight Hybrid Queen program to Florida to establish the world's first mass production faculty for instrumentally inseminated honeybee queens. Afterwards, he moved to Connecticut, where he established the Beekeeping Educational Service, offering educational programs for beekeepers. Later, he purchased Wickwaz Press from Dr. Roger and Mary Lou Morse. Larry has written a series of beekeeping books, and they are incredible. And the titles are Increased Essentials, Bee Sex Essentials, Queen Rearing Essentials, and most recently, and of course, one of my favorites, Keeping Bees Alive. He completed Package Bee Essentials in 2020. He is the publisher and co-author of Dewey Carson's Honeybee Biology and Beekeeping, with a completely revised, greatly expanded third edition released in May of 2022. He has also published a diverse array of titles by other authors dealing with bees, beekeeping, queen rearing, and pollination. And here's the hard part. These books are by professors Roger Morris, Harry Lashaw, Joe Page, Dr. Nicholas, and Gruden Koenig, and Carl Johansson, Daniel Meyer, Roger Hoopengardner, and beekeeper Steve Repaski, Ed Simon, Peter Linther, Andrew Connor, Michael Badger, William Blosted, our favorite Tammy Horn Potter, and he has reprinted books by G.M. Doolittle, John Lovell, and Frank Peltout. And this whole list is available at www.wicwas.com, wicwas.com. Connor's wide range of experiences include being a hobby beekeeper, as a 4-H'er, bee researcher, inseminator, and educator, a commercial bee queen producer, and a longtime teacher of practical beekeeping skills to thousands and thousands of beekeepers. He has traveled and lectured on bees and beekeeping in every single U.S. state and most of Canada's provinces. He has lectured in the United Kingdom, Germany, France, Czech Republic, and Thailand. And I'm very proud to introduce my friend, Dr. Lawrence John Connor, our favorite guy, Larry Connor.
Thank you, Dorothy.
You're welcome.
So everybody having a good night? I'm going to see if I can get this thing fired up here.
Okay.
So before we get too far into all of this, I wanted to kind of go over what some of you have probably already read and experienced. So we're going to talk about drone production and everything tonight. But I want to kind of review the books that we've done in prior years. The meeting in Louisville, somebody asked me what my favorite bee book is that I wrote, and it's Bee Sex Essentials. And one reason I like it so well is it does have a lot on drones. So um, I'm assuming you can see the screen of the book and the chapters or the sections that deal with drones in B6.
Yes, we can.
And I want you to, if you have a copy, to review it and be aware of the fact that you've got that and have that. Of course, Queen Rearing Essentials, second edition, many of you have that. And there's a chapter on that in terms of producing drones and also understanding drone production and how that fits into an operation where you're raising queens. And then finally, the third book is the mating biology with the Koenigers and Jamie Ellis. We worked on that. It was fun to have people working in Germany and Florida and Michigan trying to come up with stuff. And we actually did a pretty decent job, I think. So here, the whole book deals with bee sex and mating behavior. But here are some of the things that you really want to focus on. And the last one, number 12, drone quality. Many people don't think too much about quality of drones, but it's probably now the new hot topic. Well, when we talk about queens, we talk about production of queens, maturation, queen holding, stimulation of queens production, natural mating, and instrumental insemination. When we look at the drone side, we got the same thing: production of drones, maturation of drones, drone holding rather than queen holding, especially for instrumental insemination, stimulating production, natural mating, and instrumental insemination. So we're going to hit on most of those topics tonight. And so I'm going to dive right into some basic drone biology. You can age drones by where they are on your beehive. When drones first emerge, they're going to be on the brood comb. They're going to be on the combs where other drone brood is emerging, and they're going to be soft-bodied. If you happen to handle them a little bit roughly, they will defecate on you, and their feces will be kind of a cloudy, milky, foul-smelling product, and it's no fun. As those drones mature, in just a couple of days, they're going to move off the drone brood comb and onto the pollen frames. And there they're going to be very busy feeding on pollen. They feed themselves, in spite of what some people argue that, oh, they're so lazy, they don't know how to eat. Well, they can do a very fine job feeding themselves. And you, as queen producers, will learn to use that skill and have that available. Those drones are on the pollen frames. When drones start to approach flight age, this is sexual maturity, flight age comes first. Then they're going to move out into the honey supers and throughout the hive. And so those drones are, if you add a little, their feces will be clear and or clearer, won't be quite as murky looking, and their bodies will be much harder. And this is how you're able to test these drones to see if they're ready for insemination. A sexually active drone, you touch on their thorax, just to give them a tap, they're going to fly off and, go into the air, and probably you lose them if you've been trying to collect them. So here are some of the things that lead to the production of drones in a colony. So we have time of year, increasing day length, colony strength, the amount of food that's coming in. We also have to deal with the amount of food that's stored in the hive. Two different things. I call it money in the bank, and you got a paycheck coming in. So bee colonies that are going to produce drones have to have both. And then the abundance of drone comb foundation or drone comb. And then in certain areas like the tropics, drone production is going to be linked more with temperature and rainfall that affect plant growth, which stimulate all of the above in terms of the colony strength and incoming food. So if we're going to stimulate drones, you're going to want to take a look at the day length. And this is I looked this up yesterday, and for the shortest day is 9 hours and 5 minutes in Michigan. In the shortest day and the longest day is 12 hours, 15 hours and 17 minutes. And where are we today? Well, January 24th, you've got 9 hours and 40 minutes. So we've got 35 minutes gain already on the year since the solstice. And you're seeing the same thing wherever you are. And we're at latitude 42 here in Kalamazoo, Michigan. Traverse City is latitude 45. And so this is a factor that you have to keep in mind when you're talking about some of these drone production things, because the length of the day and the rate of change are both factors that are involved here. Strong colonies produce drones faster than weak colonies. So if you've got a mating nuke, if you've got a 5-frame increased colony, it can produce drones. It won't produce as many as a full-size colony. But if you are working with a lot of bees, you're doing any queen rearing, you want those big colonies with a lot of colonies. You're going to look at incoming nutrition, and I'm going to dwell on that a little bit here, because you want to know what's coming in. And a wild bee, a solitary bee specialist at Michigan State, has taken a look at all the pollen that's coming in for non-apis bees. And out of the bees that are, the pollen coming in April, 26% of it is from maples. 33% of it is in willows. This is in April, late March and April. The cherries in May will be 24%, and this is a variety of cherries, not the necessarily commercial cherries, but the wild cherries, choke cherries, and so forth. In June, you might have 8% from brambles, but look at the sumacs. 18% of the pollen coming in. Most beekeepers don't think much about sumac, and they should, because it's important both for nectar and for pollen. And so this is helping both honeybees and the other bees. Now, I've leaned on my brother Mike for some information. Mike's both a beekeeper and an arborist. Has his certification as a national arborist. And he's come up with some slides I'm going to share with you, because I think it's important that you understand nutrition and how the season affects what's going on. And the willow species, everything from pussy willow to the black willows and so forth in the swamps, he's got this number of 1,500 pounds of pollen per acre in April. That's an enormous amount of food potential for our bees together, and a good healthy colony will benefit from that. Then we have the mustards, the yellow rocket. I know that was pretty common when I was in Ohio, but there are mustards, I think, in every state of the country. Certainly I've seen them in Florida. I just saw a mention from the Jamie Ellis lab about mustards right now, this time of year in January. And I'm sure, Dorothy, you saw lots of mustards up in Alaska when you were up there chasing fires. The red buds are really important in many of the middle states. And our bees really go crazy on the red bud for pollen. But I think one of the plants that we don't appreciate fully are the crab apples. Pretty good evidence that apples in this country probably were brought in not for apple pies, but for applejack. And so here's an introduced species. We have crab apples and domesticated apples. I think the domesticated apples came later as they found mutations, or what the growers call sports. And many of them probably started out as large fruited crab apples. Blackberries, huge source of pollen. And then we get into the summer, tulip poplar, basswood, other trees. I got 3 different sumacs I'll throw out here. The smooth sumac. I think smooth refers to the shininess of the leaf. Staghorn sumac with a very large fruit head. And then the winged sumac that in Peter Littner's book, he talks about the fact that he sees the highest density of bees on flowers that he's ever seen on the winged sumac. So it's very easy to see 5 or 6 flowers or bees, honeybees, on the winged sumac. And it's a pretty amazing plant when it comes to supporting the bee colony. Black locust, we've had a good black locust honey crop this year. Again, many beekeepers don't appreciate the fact that this is a very important nectar source, as well as pollen source. One of my favorites in the summer is, of course, spotted knapweed, and again, another plant that I call them the backup timers, trying to go back to beekeepers before Columbus, and they want to get rid of. And I know that in many states, there are active eradication programs trying to eliminate several species of spotted knapweed, because, well, you tell me why. Same is true with purple loosestrife, another really important plant. A new plant that people are now planting in their yards is the Seven Suns tree. I have one in my front yard. My son has one. And it is a very attractive plant for both nectar and pollen. And it comes at the time of year in August that most people don't have much in bloom before the goldenrods come in. And I think goldenrod is important. Some goldenrods don't seem to be as productive to the bees as others. Certainly you get some other pollinators in there. I love this shot. The intensity of that color is beautiful. And then in my favorite, if you're going to get into queen rearing, if you're going to produce drones, you've got to have a good aster crop in the previous season, because this is what's going to give you a lot of stored pollen, aster pollen, in the fall and winter that your bees are going to build up. And right now, in January and February, before you probably even get in there and do any other feeding. So what would be talking about that? So beekeepers are going to do some feeding depending upon their goals, honey or syrup or sugar blocks, and pollen or pollen patties, frames of pollen, frames of honey. So many of you probably have frames of honey in a cold spot or in a freezer that you're using to make up your new colonies in the spring. Here's Mike Palmer in Vermont, and he's checking honey stores, the reserve stores that haven't been used yet. This was in February in almost on the Canadian border, where he's located in northern Vermont. And then we can have frames of pollen in the freezer that we can take out and add if we're trying to boost drone production in particular. And it is extremely effective. Now, there's some downsides we'll get to about that as well, but it's very useful for most beekeepers that have a disease-free operation. And then finally, many of us are using some sort of a pollen mixture, sugar and pollen, or not pollen, protein. Various different proteins are being added. I know the Day Dance and Man Lake, there's an escalating war between who's got the best. And you look at the back cover of today's Bee Culture, it's got Man Lake's got Ultra Bee Rocket Fuel. I guess that's a protein substitute. So, we have a lot of stuff going on there. It's all important, and it's all part of raising drones. If you're going to do any kind of drone production, you have to have drone comb. And these green colored frames have become very popular over the last, 15, 20 years. And there's some developing drone larvae you can see in these cells. This is a brand new comb, and the bees, of course, are going to draw it out rather quickly. But you'll find drones being produced in colonies in the spring, even brand new colonies. So if you get a package or if you get a nucleus in the spring, they're going to be trying to produce some drones fairly early. The image you see on your left is between two sheets of plastic foundation. So they build a little, a 1-inch slice of drone brood, because their need to produce drone brood is not strong. And I've always thought that the beginner kits, putting the varroa issue aside, the beginner kit should have had 9 frames of worker brood and 1 frame of drone brood foundation in the kit, so the bees would naturally produce drone brood. But of course, now with the varroa mites, we've got other issues that we have to contend with in terms of keeping those nasty buggers at bay. The other place on the right, you see the comb that the bees very often will build between supers. And so you've got some bees here that are sucking up the damage, and they will suck out the juices from those damaged drone larvae and haul off the carcasses and go from there. Second week of weekend of the month, I was able to get down to Farmville, Virginia, and I met a younger man, Ryan Williamson, and he shared this slide. This is what he's doing in terms of drone production, and it's a new variation, and it might be very effective. And he's using this for drone management, but it could easily be adapted for anybody who's looking at drone comb, and he's simply cutting them out for the chickens or whatever. But I like this idea. It looks like that's a plastic foundation and just letting the bees draw out natural comb so it can be easily removed. So here's an idea that you may want to play with. I said Ray, it said Ryan Williamson, and I appreciate his providing me with that slide. I've been using this technique for probably 20 years now, at least, and that's to put a comb of medium worker brood into a deep hive body, so you get this add-on construction of drone brood. And again, this for varroa mites, you can cut it off, but for raising drones for mating, you now have drones, preferably of a target species or line, whatever you're trying to produce, in exactly which queen needs that produce these, and you can keep them aligned, keep track of them, keep them kosher, if you will, so you don't have any cross contamination. And I guess I didn't realize that's slightly out of focus, but probably because I've used this slide so much, I'm cutting and pasting and cutting and pasting and cutting and pasting. So this shows one that we did here in Michigan, and you got some really nice drone brood here at the bottom of this, and this can be used very effectively for drone production. For most of you, you probably are going to use some of the green plastic drone comb foundation. You're going to put in, this is what, the number 4 position out of 10 frames, the number 3 position if you're using 8 frames. And that's just a good method to do it. And I will show you later on how we can put up to 4 frames into a colony and rotate them around so you constantly have drones in production. And if you're trying to keep them, as I say, kosher of a known type, then you can put a queen excluder on the bottom so the drones can't get out and you have some control on what they're producing. So here's a comb of drone brood. You can see they've actually produced some honey. And so you've got, you can't really see the brood on the right hand slide, but it's coming into play. In the tropics, I think this may be one of Dewey Karen's old slides. I've got similar ones showing bees in Panama, Grenada, St. Croix. The big thing there is the rainfall, because they don't have the impact of seasonal day length change that we do, but they're dependent upon the plants. And so when there's a rainfall, you get a lot of bloom from various trees, shrubs, and annuals. So that will stimulate your bees to produce drones. They expand their brood nests, they produce drones, they'll raise queen cells, and they'll swarm. Very productive. So the rainfall and with adequate temperatures, it does come into play here. So as we look at the maturation of drones, you see the eggs here at the bottom of the cell, and the drones are going to go through that 24-day developmental period that we've probably all seen. And here's the green drone comb foundation, 4 cells per inch rather than 5 for worker brood. And then bees will quite often build a single row of drones at the bottom of a frame on the face of the comb where the plastic foundation doesn't quite reach. So you've got a single row of drones here at the bottom. So here are some drones that are actually emerging. So that's 24 days later. There are 2 things here, that 2 time periods in this that pretty well established, and I know some recent research has come out of Purdue and USDA about the need for nutrition for drones. Well, we've known this for a long time, and you have to have good pollen nutrition for good active and viable drones. There are I'm off sequence. Sorry. But anyway, drones tend to be misunderstood. I think less so than in the past. A lot of drone brood gets cut out. Combs get culled because they've got drone brood in them. And yet, if you remove all the drone brood from a colony, they're just going to tear that worker brood down and rebuild some of it. So attempts to get more honey production by removing drone comb have failed, and usually the honey production with drone brood present is the same as if you remove all of it. So you're just making work for yourself. So what do we know? We know that drones are haploid. They've got 1 set of chromosomes, and this is the sex determination mechanism of honeybees. We know that makes the drone that a particular queen produces is basically a flying gamete of the queen. So she has, you have some real power in terms of, instead of having to think about propagating queens, you can be propagating drones from particular lines, and these, what I call these target drones, so that you have a target line that you want to work with. You can produce target drones from them, and you've got them available. So 24 hours in development. And this is the point I wanted to make about the nutrition. We know that we need to have good nutrition. The end of the larval period, just about a day before the larva pupates, we have to have good pollen nutrition, protein nutrition in the hive for those drones to produce sperm. They only produce out of those 24 hours, 24 days. The developing drone is only producing sperm for about 24 hours. So, that's not a very long time for sperm production. When you look at humans and other animals and so forth, sperm production goes on continuously in a healthy individual. Whereas with bees, probably other insects as well, the nutrition is linked to a very specific time period, and it is linked to a very specific requirement for nutrition. When the drones emerge, and somewhere around I think it's around the 5th day, I've lost that. The young drones, can you see my cursor? Well, if you can, if you look at the top image, you see.
Yes, we see it. We see it.
All right. You see the 2 testes of the drone. So you can see the large abdomen of a drone. This is a young adult drone, and those sperm that, if they were produced in the larval stage, are now in the testes. And so you see this has been dissected out, and you see over here the seminal vesicles. So there are 2 of them, 1 on each side. And the sperm is going to have to migrate from the testes to here. This happens, and it also requires good nutrition. Without good nutrition, the sperm don't migrate, and your drones are essentially not going to be good. Now, I put this in just to remind us that varroa mites can mess this all up. So just, footnote, that we're assuming that we've got our mites under control here. Now, as the drones, these young drones, as the sperm migrates, then the seminal vesicles become very large, and this allows the very rapid release of sperm during that very fast ejaculation. And if you've done any insemination, you know exactly what I'm talking about. So the sperm is all in the seminal vesicles, and during that ejaculation, it all comes out, and so the semen's floating on top of the mucus. So the mucus gland and the seminal vesicles are side by side. And so during the ejaculation, either in the lab or in nature, when the queens and drones mate, this is part of what's going on in mating. So getting back to the point I want to make here is you've got roughly 2 days of that 24-day period that nutrition is absolutely critical. And how do you manage that? You have to provide good nutrition to the colony all the time. Now, you probably see some of your drones flying about a week after they emerge, if you've marked any, or you have a group that you know the age cohort. And so they start making orientation flights. And I simply put a queen excluder in the front of a hive in the afternoon when the drones are flying. Drones generally do not fly in the morning. They fly in the afternoon at different times. Earlier, if they've been confined because of weather for a couple of days. It's really hot out. They may go a little bit later in the day. So you get orientation flights, but you don't really get any mating until about 10 to 12 days. I left off an E. Some drones may wait until they're 18 days old before they make any mating flights. That's nearly 3 weeks. So you've got drones in the hive, and I'm not too sure the evolutionary advantage of that. Maybe you could explain it to me in some detail. I want to spend a minute talking about what Tom Seeley calls social physiology. And this is the whole business of what causes a colony to decide, I'm putting air quotes on that. How do they decide it's time for drones? And you probably, I just said some of the things, but so you have a colony that's like this one. I don't think there are any drone brood cells on that particular comb. And this is what you want when you're raising bees. You want a lot of drone worker brood. But when you're trying to raise queens, there comes to a point where a colony is developing, and this was a February colony in Connecticut, and the day after a 6-inch snowfall. The colony is up at the top. They're growing, they're expanding. The brood nest is coming. So at some point, even in the coldest area, now drone production has probably already started in Florida colonies, South Florida colonies, in January, or if they haven't started by the 24th. This is an optimal date to look for the first brood, but you might see some drone brood all winter long, depending on the feeding situation. So why do bees keep the adult population around? And when do they tear out some of the brood, and when do they expel the workers? So these are all things I'm just going to give you a series of question marks. I think that one of the factors that we don't fully appreciate is what the varroa mite has taught us, that drone brood has an odor or a pheromone, and it is attracted to the mites. So it's probably got a very definite function in the beehive in terms of managing drone populations. So we know that sealing drone brood, as you see those cells here in these two right here in this one, This one. So there's 4 there that the mites would be attracted to. We do know Professor Linsky from Israel did some work a number of years ago showing us that there is a drone mandibular pheromone that is used. The drones use it to attract to each other to establish sites, the drone congregation areas, for mating. Now that is a secondary factor, whatever causes the location of those sites. But it's sort of a aggregation pheromone of some sort between individuals of the same sex for finding an area where mating is taking place. All right. So is there an adult drone pheromone besides this? I think there probably are other pheromones that are involved, and I don't think we've had quite enough work done on that area that I think some citizen science would probably give us some real good information and the chemicals that are involved in drone production. So we've talked about the photoperiod and these other things, and I think maybe that the production of new nurse bees is important in terms of stimulating drone production at this time of year as we get into the brood cycle. As these new bees are produced and released here in the next 30 days, let's say, we could have hundreds, if not thousands, of new nurse bees being produced in our overwintering colonies. If you're in a southern state, you probably already see some of this. I'm blanking for a second. So we've got the cells in drone brood, the same as in worker brood. The worker bees have to prepare the cells for the queen to lay into. And queen doesn't lay into a dirty comb. Those cells have to be polished. And we think, is measuring the size of the cell. She backs up and she releases an unfertilized egg where she does not release sperm. And that's why we get drone brood in these combs. Again, I think we need to understand more of the information that's involved here. And we've talked about the weather and the incoming food supply. We talked about trimming. One of the aspects of trimming that I think is important is that when you have a colony that is developing in the spring, if you get some poor weather, bad weather, cold weather, wet weather, I've seen warm temperatures in a week of rain in May in Connecticut, and they're throwing the drones out. They're also building queen cells. So you've got, if you will, one group of bees doing one thing, another doing another. But because there's no food coming in, you actually see larvae this size being pulled out of the colonies. But the bees are actually taking and removing the eggs first, and then the young larvae. We're talking about drones first, and then they'll pull out the older larvae, and they start pulling out the drone brood. It would be very unusual for them to pull drones out in the spring. We have seen that. I've seen this in colonies that have been exposed to pesticides, and the colony can't support the drones. So this is all part of this colony's natural energy and management system that they seem to have evolved. So drones can go from one colony to another. Here's some drones on a queen excluder at the front of the hive. This is a fun way for you to do it. You can take a little, an artist's brush, put a little dab of paint on the abdomen of each of these drones, come back the next day or a week later and see how these drones have moved from colony to colony. They are shopping for the best deal for food. So if you've got one colony that's got an issue, they'll look for the best one. And my favorite story there is that we had yellow line colonies that filled up with dark drones, black drones. And I came to the conclusion they were probably drones from midnight colonies that were being produced a fair distance away. I mean, I'm going to say at least 5 miles. And they were, at the end of the season, they were migrating into our colonies, where we were maintaining the colonies for good drone holding, while these were production colonies and they were done for the season. Honey flow is over. Honey had been harvested. Bees are down into a single deep box, and there's just no room for those drones. So they are certainly looking what's going on. I think I talked about this, that the package colonies, the increased colonies, will produce drones in any spot they can make it. And so the question is there a selection pressure for a new queen to produce drones that are carrying her genes? And is that pressure present early or expressed early in the season? I know that may be a little hard to figure out. Is there any reason why it's in the best interest for a queen to produce drones so early? Now, it's my experience that most queens produce drones fairly quickly in their reproductive cycle, and they may slow down in their drone production as time goes on. So if you've been in a nectar flow, you've got the energy coming in, but the drone production goes down. Then you have a small flow coming in later in the summer if you're in that area like that. But the drone production, getting that queen to lay new drones is very difficult. And there's some evidence, some research, that the queen remembers what she's done. And if she has produced a large cycle of drones, she takes time off and she doesn't produce as many drones. This is something that needs, more field work so we understand what's going on. And the last comment there is this, does this drone production reflect poor queen quality? I'm of the opinion that the queens that are about to go into supersedure, a month or two before supersedure, will have a sudden burst of, not sudden, but will have an increase in the amount of drone brood that she's producing. And this is quite often at the beginning of her second season, especially using instrumentally inseminated queens, that these queens don't last as long as we'd like to think. And is this a biological premonition of something? I don't know. But, we have a lot of questions. I have a lot of questions on how all of this works out. Yeah, that just says what I was saying is there a selection pressure for a last genetic surge, a few thousand drones being produced just before that queen is replaced by her daughter. Now, I talk about two types of queens, and most beekeepers do this as well. We talk about drone mothers. That's the mother of this group of drones. They're selected for producing the drones. They're usually the daughters of last year's breeder queens in many commercial operations. If you are in a drone program, like our old Starline program, it was based on a rotation every other year. We'd switch breeders so that this year's breeder queen produces next year's drone mothers, which makes the breeder queen for the queens that we're raising the drone mother breeder. I think I have that next. Hold on. Yeah, the drone mother breeder. The drone mother breeder is the one that you can use to produce hundreds, if not thousands, of daughter queens. And they should be in all your production colonies. People say, well, how many of my colonies should I have producing target drones? And I say all of them, because you need to have as many drones being produced of the target type that you need. Now, if you're doing instrumental insemination, you're going to have to, have target drone production for each of the lines that you're working with. But still, you need to work on that and focus on what's going on. In nature, Seeley and Morse found that between 15 and 20% of all the cells in feral colonies were drone-sized cells. And I think that's probably pretty close to what we get if we provide adequate amounts of drone drone comb foundation in a normal colony. But if a beekeeper if you said, 1 out of 5 frames, it's got to be set aside for drone production. But indeed, that's what I'm going to show you in a few minutes. Drone comb is also used for honey production, honey storage, and it works very well. It's probably the most efficient or economic storage amount stored for the least amount of wax in drone cells. And I've said this already, that colonies that don't have adequate drone brood, the worker bees will tear down worker broods and cells and rebuild them, and sometimes make a real clever mess out of the whole thing. All right, I've said that a couple of times. I need to do some trimming on those slides. Okay. So we see combs drone cells being produced at the bottom of the frames, especially on colonies with screen bottoms. And if you have a fairly adequate space between hive bodies, you'll see that. We need to make sure we have plenty of stored food in these colonies. And I like to have at least 3 deep frames with honey stored in it, or sugar syrup stored, or a combination of food that is stored and is being fed. My observation was that when we relied solely on feeding for drone production, and queen production too, we did not get nearly the result that you get when you've got stored food. And most beekeepers, they say, well, I can't afford to leave 3 frames of honey in that hive. It's worth a lot of money. And so you've got to assess the value of your queens and drones that you're producing. Protein, feeding pollen patties, frame feeders, new hives, build them up. This is long term. And of course, feeding frames with frozen pollen, and pollen that's been collected in pollen traps. So when I say frozen pollen, I'm talking about the frames with pollen in them are frozen. Pollen traps, if you're going to trap pollen, I have no problem with it, but you have to be very, very careful about American foul brood and chalk brood. And I'll throw in one more. It looks like that may be an excellent way of you spreading some of these viruses. So think about this before you throw that pollen patty you may have been taught to feed in the past. You want to add 3 or 4 drone combs to a hive body in a really strong colony, and you want to add 1 frame every 5 days. So you get a total of 4 frames in there over a 20-day period. So the first frame on the 25th day will be able to come out because it should be emerging drones. Or drones about ready to emerge. I've said that already. So maturation of drones, we've talked about that. And I'm going to focus on this now. This is the article, December 2003, Bee Culture, Drone Feeding at Holding Colonies. This is something I wrote, a 3-page article. And so the first slide shows you, you can read the text. I put it in there. So, answer any questions. You see the 1, 2, 3, 4. So we're going to put 4 frames of drone comb foundation, preferably drawn, not foundation, but drawn. It should be drawn comb, but I know you don't have it. I don't. I never do. And so you're going to start out where frame number 4 is, and that's going to be the first frame you put in. Then come back 5 days later and put the second frame in. And then the third day, the number 1 is moved up to the top box. And on the fourth visit number, you've got 4 frames in there. The oldest 2 are above a queening schooner. And so now you have drones in production target drones that are confined and they can't, shouldn't be able to fly. And so if you read, you see my cursor down here, it says this colony prevents drone flight. You could add an upper entrance if you wanted to give them flight, or you could have it so it's optional. But once these drones start to fly up here, up in this area, then you've got to monitor or use those drones in instrumental insemination, because once they start to fly, if you don't have an upper entrance, they're going to come down and get trapped in this queen excluder, and they'll eventually pile up, which is why I don't like to have them at the bottom, because sometimes they'll block the entrance with dead drones, or drones trying to exit. And so it can be pretty messy. But this is a modification of what we used in Florida. And I apologize, it's not a better slide. I need to go back and redo these, like everything else in my life. So the second colony that we use for in our operation were what I call drone holding colonies. And these were single deep high bodies, and they were made up with what do we got here? We got 2 frames on the outside. We got 2 frames of pollen and honey. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4 frames of worker brood, and 1, 2, 3 frames of drone brood. These are drones that could have been from the previous slide. This could be the oldest frames here that are being moved into these drone holding colonies. So this is an emerging colony. This is like your cell finisher, cell builder, that you are now finishing these colonies, finishing these drones. You've got adult drones. And you are feeding these colonies. This is supposed to represent sugar syrup. You could have I don't like to use the division board feeders with drones because they get into the syrup and drown. So I use a feeder. This is for the worker bees to feed on lots of stored food. You're into these colonies once or twice a week to manage them. You're adding frames of brood. Once one of these frames, these 4 frames emerge, you take it out, shake the bees off. You work them in early in the morning so you're not going to lose the drones to flight. If you open this up in the afternoon, all your drones are gone. No, the sexually mature drones are going to fly out. Now, the key to all this is down here, the cage virgin. This is my graphic for a cage virgin. And we put this between a couple of a worker and a drone comb. And what she does is she tries to duplicate the conditions you get in a colony that is going through queen replacement. And this is when you get optimal drone holding. And by doing that, you're able to harvest these drones, go into them, and we'll show you that in just a minute here. But this is a good way. So I know we'll have questions on this, but we can come back to it when we got that. Natural mating, I don't want to spend a great deal of time. The Kerniger book does a nice job. You can go out with your balloons. Now you can go out with your mechanical drone with the instead of the balloons, you can go out with a mechanical drone, find out where the flyaways are and the mating areas. So this isn't a flyaway. This was with Marion Ellis's program when he had it going in Kansas. And there's going to be Nebraska. Marion's from Nebraska. And so we can see that we can, we've got a plug with a queen pheromone in it. There's no queen there. And so if the average queen mates with about 13 drones, I need to add more drones to this. The record now is around 60 drones for mating. The sperm, of course, is stored in the spermatheca. There's a spermathecal gland that if you remove that, and Gudrun Kerniger, the woman that helped write that book on mating behavior, she surgically removed the glands and found that the sperm died. The queen lived, the sperm died after she cut out that gland. So it wouldn't be nice to figure out what is producing. And so here's a drawing from Dade, Anatomy of the Honeybee. You can see that the a single ovary. The other ones you can't see it, and the eggs come down here, and then they hit the valve fold, and the egg temporarily stops. Sperm is released from the spermatheca and migrates down here, and the release is determined by volume. Some of John Harbaugh's research years ago. And then the egg is deposited into either a worker or drone cell. So if there's no sperm released, of course, that would become a drone. So the queen is holding the sperm from all those drones, and that gives us our ability to do some very interesting things with honeybee genetics. Now, the drone queen timing is interesting because, we figured that drones are going to be 24 days, queens 15, 16 days, but then that's for their pre-emergence. Then emergence to maturity, 10 to 12 days for drones, 8 days for queens, total of, I think the next slide shows it better. So you get the difference here, 9 days longer for drones in the, I can't even touch this table. And then the emerges, you got 2 to 4 days longer for the developmental time, but the total difference between a queen and a drone, it takes the drone 11 to 13 days longer to develop. And so as a result, we recommend that you time your grafting of your queens based on when drones are first sealed and have been sealed for 5 days. And that happens to be when the drones have purple eyes. So you can do a physical exam and take a look at what's going on there. Now, drones for instrumental insemination, you can buy, or just found something I found online, and you could probably do some searching on your own. A flight cage that you use in your insemination area. This is similar to what we had in our lab. We had actually built into the wall so that instead of a window, we had a queen excluder material and then an entrance where we could put cages in and let the drones fly. You like to let them exercise a little bit before you pick them up. And also that you've got drones in here with worker bees, so the worker bees can get out and minimize the number of stings. I didn't say eliminate, I said minimize. One of the things that we did when we started, and then we realized it was not cost effective, but it's fine for you and small groups of inseminators. You're doing 10 or 12 queens at a time, and that's where you go into colonies where the drones are confined. You can hand pick the drones that are on the outside frames. You do this in the morning and then put them into holding cages. So here are a couple of cages I found online. Hardware cloth. This looks like one on the left is zinc, and may have been adapted for a specialized hive. Then a cork or wooden plug, and the one on the right is a little more modern. And so you can just do some. And we made all our own stuff. Another method that I have never used, that I've seen people do it, is to take a nozzle of a spray can and kind of make it so the paint comes out as a splatter. And then as you work a hive in the morning, you put a little splatter color of a certain, if every line has a color, you put on your yellow on the drones on the comb, and then you can come back and pick out drones that have that color on them. So it probably requires some careful testing, a little tinkering, but once you get this going, then you have the target drones that you want. We use a lot of very simple equipment. We used a queen excluder and an inner cover, and the inner cover is already on the hive, and we are not working that hive, but we would take the cover off that hive and put a queen excluder on top, and either tape it or tack it together so that and I like to use the wooden queen excluders, so that we call them drone sandwiches, because we now have the drones are now the filling of the sandwich, because the bees come up, they see the light. This is a colony that's got a queen excluder at the bottom, and our drone holding colony, they come up to the opening, and they come out, but they're caught by the queen excluder. And so we have to stay out there, because they'll cook on a hot day. Those drones will cook very quickly. And so you take them and you remove them, and because they're tacked together, we would actually slide one on, a new one on, as we slid one off. A little messy, takes some skill, usually takes 2 people. And then we would put some tape over the opening, and then we could turn that colony upside down so it's queen excluder down, and store these over other colonies that we could then have these drones available for taking to the lab. And then they literally just turn them over, have the queen excluder down and the inner cover up, and put a cup here and let the bees come up. And you can just reach in and into that cup and pull out a few drones. What I like about that is that while you get some young drones, if you know the age of the drones in a colony, you are running very close to 100% functional drones, rather than squeezing 10 to get one that's sexually mature enough and isn't on a orientation flight or a cleansing flight. So these very simple said, I need to get some work on that. And then, because we were going through literally boxes of drones a day, we would have to shake packages. And so we would take this is a regular, I couldn't find it. All my stuff is probably in slides set out in the garage. I couldn't find what I was looking for today. So you would take the window screen off of one of these packages, use a wooden package, and replace it with queen excluder material. And so you can shake bees out of one of these holding colonies, and you could do it in an out yard. So you got worker bees and drones in there, and then put them on top of a hive, maybe a little smoke, in a shell, and get the worker bees to leave. You've got drone bees that are in the cage, and then you can bring them in and put them into a flight cage, and you can stay busy for a couple of hours. And when we do this, we would probably have everybody filling syringes. So all our syringes are filled, and then we would do the insertions with the semen after we've harvested this crop of drones. And sometimes we would just bring in a cage and use part of them, and not all of them, because we didn't want to waste the drones. Sometimes our drones were pretty precious to us. And with that comment, I'll end here, but I just wanted to say, when we were running our queen rearing operation with instrumental insemination, we had 2 people working full-time on raising queens. We had 2 other people working full-time raising drones. So it is important that you put a great deal of emphasis, time, money, resources in your drone production. And I think that'll do it. Good. So Dorothy, I'm ready to address the troops here.
All right. Yeah, go ahead and close. Well, first off, before we have you close out your screen, do we have anyone that wants him to revisit any of the slides? And keep in mind that you're monitored.
I put everybody to sleep.
Oh, I think they're just overwhelmed.
Well, good. I like it.
Yeah. So there's no questions that he needs. Oh, I'd like this one to revisit that one a little bit. That was really quite interesting, this one. the holding colonies and with the queen in there. I really like that. I will be using that. Thank you.
We use the two people that we had working this. They would set up colonies, on a rainy day, and they'd have stacks of these boxes, and they made up basically 15 to 25 of these drone holding colonies every week during the spring. And every one of those colonies, and here's, I like the fact that when you put money into beekeeping, you don't lose it. You just have to know how to utilize it. That we would take, right. Once we use these drones, we take those packages out of colonies like this or some other method of harvesting the drones. We would then take those colonies that have basically they're drone free now, take out that cage virgin, put in a mated queen, and fill out the box, would take out the drone comb, put in worker comb, and we would make up a bee yard every week. So that's the level of operation that we were at, that we were producing 15 to 20 colonies per week, depending on which week it was and what kind of lines we were working with. And because we had, and the other thing is that we had drone production taking place in 13 different inbred lines. So that's 13 target groups of drones that we had to maintain.
Well, I have learned so much. Let's go ahead and does anyone have, I've got some questions, but I'll go kind of towards the end. Does anyone here have any questions? And Phil, I don't care what you think, how silly questions are, please just jump in. Go ahead,
Joe. On the previous slide there that we had, Larry, where you had basically 4 frames of drone brood that you were putting in one colony, is there any chance where the colony says, hey, we have too many drones in here and now they're going to try and supersede the queen because they say she's not any good because we have all these drones to contend with, so she's making too many drones for us, so we're going to get rid of her?
You always have an issue with supersedure. We were using inbred, instrumentally inseminated and often inbred queens, so we always had a problem with queen cells. So we're constantly cutting cells.
Now, Larry, isn't it true that this setup you're having, you're removing from your breeder queens that you're getting the drones from, that she's laying those, and you're removing those right to another hive? And this is a production hive. I mean, so obviously you're using a virgin.
Yeah, it could be either way. You could shake these bees right into that shaker box. That package colony, package box that's got the queen excluder material on one side.
Right.
And that lets the worker bees get out when you smoke them.
Right.
Dorothy, can you see our questions that we put in?
No, I mean, I'm sorry. No, I don't. Just a minute. Let me see if I can pull it up to get to them. I'm not seeing any questions.
There's several in there.
Okay, let me see if I can't figure this out. I've got so many people in here. I've got to, let me see. I'll have to.
Yeah, I don't see the questions. So
yeah, yeah, hang on if I can pull it up.
Do you want me to read them?
Dorothy, I think it's under chat.
That would be what Marguerite?
It's under chat.
Okay, first question, Larry. Is there any evidence to support the point that removing drone brood demoralizes the colony? That's the end of the question. And it says, I've heard this several times, but can find no academic research to support this.
I don't think that that's anything you need to worry about.
Okay.
I think that there's any demoralization is minor. And what I think Joe Kowaleski was probably right saying, if you get too many drones in there, that you might stimulate that trimming behavior where they try to get rid of some of those drones.
Okay, thank you. The next question from Christy Allen. What is the latest recommendation for distance of drone holding colonies from mating yards for open mating?
Quarter-mile intervals as far as your bees will hold out. So you got 20 colonies, you're not going to go very far. The other thing you can do with these drone holding colonies is that you can bring them from other locations, 3-4 miles away, 20 miles away, and bring them in to saturate in areas that you're using for your mating. So I would think that you'd want to have the equivalent of at least 200 colonies for a good mating yard.
Okay.
Quarter-mile intervals, small yards, under 10 colonies per yard, but at different intervals.
And in quarter of a mile increments, is that what you're saying?
I think so, yes.
Okay. Next question, it's actually from Richard Woodham, me. Is there a specific ratio of drones you want to try to raise per virgin queen that you're trying to raise?
Well, it's hard to, if you're doing open mating, it's pretty hard to predict what the Mother Nature is going to provide. In other words, other beekeepers are providing, bee trees are providing. If you're doing it for instrumental insemination, you probably want to figure out how many queens you're going to produce, and then the number of drones you can produce per drone producing colony, and divide that number by 10, and that will probably give you an accurate prediction of what you'll need for instrumental insemination. You'll need a lot more drones than you ever thought you did.
Yeah, I had read some research that said a high number of 75. I thought that was a little high.
75 drones?
Drones per one queen.
Oh, I wouldn't think so. I think 1 to 200 might be about right.
Okay. Next question from Casey Dittmer. If open mating, what is the optimal number of drone flooding yards surrounding the queen yard, and what distance?
Could you read that again?
If open mating, what is the optimal number of drone flooding yards surrounding the queen yard, and what distance away?
Okay. I would say at least 4 yards at a quarter mile north, south, east, west. And then as you have more colonies, you can go another quarter mile. And that's another 4. Maybe at some point you're going to add 8 and then 16. I mean, how with open mating, the question is, what's your saturation level?
Sure.
I think that most people are mortified to find out that they do all the things they think they're doing, they're lucky to get a 10% saturation.
Okay. And just to repeat it, you said for how many mating nukes you would have a north, south, east, and west yard a quarter mile?
I didn't give you the number of mating nukes.
Okay.
You asked how many mating nukes in this yard.
Okay.
And so you want to have drones saturated in all 4 directions if you can, quarter mile radius. When we had a 40-acre farm, we tried to produce. We tried to have drone colonies, probably in 4 different locations, but one of those was on a neighbor's property. So you do the best you can because you have to deal with real life.
Okay. Next question from Ed Scott. Interested in any comments about how to isolate and then harvest drones from individual lines?
Well, I think that you've got to use a closed system that I described. I don't see how you can, unless you mark each drone when it emerges with paint, and then collect it later and to bring it in for instrumental insemination. I don't see any way that you can produce drones in isolation and then harvest them for instrumental insemination.
Okay. Okay. Marguerite McClintock says, can you hold more than one virgin in this drone feeding and holding colony you gave an example of?
I don't know why not. I don't know why though. I mean, if you have multiple versions, I don't think you gain by doing that.
Sorry, Larry. My question, the reason why I asked that was merely a matter of efficiency and being lazy, just putting them all together in one area. I just, there are some times when you can't do that, and that's why I wanted to know, hey, if I was banking virgins because I'm getting ready to inseminate, could I put them all in the same location?
I think this is a great thing to try out and then report back.
Yeah, it's just me being lazy, that's all.
I don't see any problem with it. I just don't want you to go out there and find all the virgins are dead.
Yeah.
So that would be my concern.
That was all the questions I see in the chat. Back to you, Dorothy.
Thank you. Thank you. I do have a couple of questions, and I absolutely love this program, Larry. Thank you. And one thing we're working on is trying to preserve these genetics in Eastern Kentucky. And that basically is where we've got some cryo units set up, and we're going to be doing some harvesting. And we've got a cryo unit lined up, another one lined up, and then we're learning how to use it here in June. So the question I have, is to extend the drone laying production, as far later into the fall as we can, just to collect semen for cryo freezing. And I'm assuming like you would not extract honey off of those drone hives, because if you were to slow down or stop the food supply of the maximum amount of honey you have in there, and if you were to take honey away from them, won't it impact the drone production?
All right. Before I try to answer that question, which I probably can't, my question is this: do we have all the daughters that we can produce from that particular queen?
Well, probably not. I mean, what we're looking at is collecting.
We have an expression in instrumental insemination.
Okay.
It predates computers. Garbage in, garbage out.
Oh,
I've seen beekeepers take any drone they can to use to inseminate a queen with, and then they're disappointed with the results. So if you're going to do the effort of instrumental insemination and any other technology, which you're talking about, you have to make sure that you have the target drones that you want. And so I want you to step back, and tell me exactly how you're harvesting these drones and who from.
Well, we have a yard that's been DNA tested. So we know the genetics exactly. And then we have the same yard has been, lots of mites have been collected from it. So we have the DNA and we have the chewing stock. And okay. I think.
All right. So now my question is, how many queens are we talking about that carry this?
No. What I'm talking about here is the cryo unit of freezing these genetics for future use, not to just.
I get it. That's not my question.
Okay.
I want to know how many drones can you produce in a year?
How many queens or how many drones?
Yes. I want to know how many drones, how many drone mothers do you have?
Well, our yard is, we've got right now about 60, sorry. Let me turn this off. We've got around 60 hives in it. And we probably have, I'm going to say, at least 10 hives of premium queens that top chewers. And then we have probably another 10 to 15 or 20 of those that are top chewers too, but would be used for drones.
Here's my suggestion. If you produce daughters from those top chewers,
yes,
they're flying gametes. The drones are flying gametes.
Okay.
Doesn't make any difference what that daughter queen mates to. It does not make any difference. The 64 suitors that daughter queen mates to is not going to affect the genetics of the drones that daughter queen produces. So now you can produce 1,000 daughters from each one of those 10 queens.
Yeah.
And you have an abundance of drones in a confined system like you're looking at here.
Yeah.
So I think the first thing you need to do is increase the probability of having more drones than you ever need. In terms of prolonging drone holding, I think you'll find that you can keep drones in these in the drone holding colony, in this colony here, for about a month.
Okay.
I think your real question is, how long can you keep producing drones?
That's
really up to your season. And the more colonies you have set up with specific queens that are confined and constantly, you got lots of drone worker brood in there, lots of food. You got a feeder here. Then you try to push these as long as you can. I think if you know you have a fall flow, you would probably be wise to keep pushing these bees with food during any dearth period you have up until through the fall flow. So you've got as many, because I know you're all busy people and you're trying to coordinate all this. But once you see drones in production, you want to keep them in production. You don't want them trimmed. You don't want the bees eating them. And secondly, and that's a nutritional issue primarily, nutritional fix. And then you want to keep as many drones in production as you can. And so one of the other reasons is to have plenty of these daughter queens is that you've got all these drones that are being produced that carry that genetic information.
Okay. Now, and
I don't think you believe me.
No, I believe you. I absolutely. Rarely do I not believe you.
Well, I think it's important. In fact, this is one of the advantages of the haploid diploid system is you basically have another generation. And I can't tell you how many times we saved an inbred line because, we had drones. Yeah. So, okay. Okay. Next question.
There were no more questions in the chat, Dorothy.
Yeah, there are no other questions in the. Does anybody want to personally ask the questions that they've got in there? We've got Larry trapped here, so we need to squeeze as much information out of him as we can.
So how many people do we have here? Do we got a final count?
We've had close to 45. I've got not the count now. And then we're sitting at close to 40. And then we've got a handful that can't make it, which will get a recording.
All right, good.
And actually there'll probably be I'm going to guess they'll get about around 20 plus requests for the recording that for some reason they couldn't make it.
Gotcha.
But it's been a nice turnout.
That's pretty good.
Yes.
How many of those people are actually doing instrumental insemination using insemination devices? Anybody know?
Probably 6 people.
Okay.
And one of the inseminators from Wisconsin couldn't make it tonight, so he will be. Jeff Bird is in here. He has quite a few inseminators on his staff, but in the Kentucky line, I think we have probably 6 to 8 inseminators, and then Fred Ransom, Wisconsin has an inseminator he works with, and Michigan has a couple inseminators, and Illinois has several inseminators. I know Pennsylvania they've just gone through this huge program where, and if Bert is still on here, he could tell us about how many inseminators they put out there, but the Penn State funded some tremendous classes on insemination, and I don't know the numbers that they actually inseminators they produce, but we're looking at this, affecting probably around, I'm going to guess between all these states, at least 20 inseminators.
Good. One of the things that I recommend people do is that when they're learning the process, focus on collecting semen first, because you can be filling syringes or tubes while other people are making actually doing the insemination. And we found that it's very effective. There's some people that are just very good at collecting the semen, and you can always have, and if you don't use them today, they just stay on the shelf overnight.
Right.
You don't want to refrigerate them. You don't want to, you just keep them at room temperature, 70, 80 degrees.
Right. I think my understanding is without extender about 4 days, and Jason makes an extender.
Just think about the semen I got from Brother Adam. It was probably 2 weeks old.
Yeah, and he probably used some kind of extender. Jason makes something up that's up to up to 4 weeks, but I don't last at that. I don't keep it that long.
His person probably put the only thing he added would be the antibacterial solution that he used during the process.
Okay.
Yeah. It's and there were 1 or 2 tubes that were a little less willing to be liquefied. So yeah, but you can do it.
Okay.
And
could you revisit like single box hives? Do you agree that they don't make, if you're looking at a single deep and a single medium versus 2 deeps in a couple mediums for the difference of producing drones, what the difference would be?
Well, it's a numbers game. You got, how many bees can you produce in each single or deep? You got people out there with 5-frame, 6-frame, 7-frame nukes. I use 8-frame hives. I think that 2 8-frame boxes work out pretty well for drone production, and old farts like me can lift them sometimes.
You have to think about that stuff as we're aging.
Yeah.
You look back and it's been 20 years and it's been a blink of an eye. So yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's like this article, 2008, 2003.
Yeah.
So yeah, it flies fast. 21 years.
Yeah, it does fly by. All right. Well, thank you. Want to really tell you, Larry, how much we appreciate you. And it's supposed to be.
You take care, and everybody have a great season. And you got my email. Let me just go back up. Feel free to drop me a note if you have ljconnor@aol.com.
Okay.
All right.
I'll send that out as well. So thank you so much, Larry.
Oh, you're welcome.
I'll give you a buzz and talk to you tomorrow, as well as I'll send you this recording.
Okay, great. Thanks.
All right.
Thank you, Larry.
Bye, everybody.
Thanks, Larry. Have a good night.
So much.